Long ago, this was known as the city of Hawar, or Humayma as it is known today. Archaeologists have uncovered a farmhouse belonging to the Abbasid family and a mosque built sometime later. When the Muslims of Iraq defeated the Umayyads of Damascus, they wanted a member of Muhammad's family to support and legitimize their revolt. And so they came here to Humayma, 27 miles from Petra. It was here that they found Muhammad's family and the Quraysh tribe. They didn't go to Mecca in Saudi Arabia or Medina. They came here to Humayma, 27 miles outside of Petra. It was here that they found the Quraysh tribe and the family of Muhammad, not in Saudi Arabia.
So far, we have discovered that the early mosques of Islam all faced the ancient city of Petra. But does the city of Petra fit the Islamic descriptions of the original holy city of Islam?
There is a story told by all of the early biographers of Muhammad. It concerns Abdullah, Muhammad's father. He was working in the field one day and he came home with dirt on his hands. He went into his first wife and said, "Lie with me," but she refused because he was dirty. So he went out, washed off the soil, went into his next wife, Amina. She conceived, and in this way, Muhammad was born. What is important to us about this story is that all of the early writers use the same word for the dirt on Abdullah's hands. They all use an Arabic word for soil, especially the soil of a cultivated plot or field. The problem is, there is no cultivatable land near Mecca. However, when we come to Petra, we discover that Petra had water, fields, and trees.
According to archaeologists, there were private and public gardens, as well as running water brought into the city through aqueducts and clay pipes. Archaeologists have described fruit trees, grapes, and gardens existing in ancient Petra. Even today, there are cultivated plots of land between Petra and El Beida, which is 5 kilometers away. By analyzing ancient soil, researchers have discovered that only 100 years ago, the hills around Petra were covered with trees, including oak, juniper, pistachio, and carob.
Not only did the holy city have trees and fields, it was also a walled city. Ibn Ishaq says, and they surrounded him by the walls of Mecca. Now this is very puzzling because Mecca had no city walls. Some think perhaps this was a house in Mecca, but Ibn Ishaq specifically says the walls of Mecca. But Mecca was not a walled city. So what about Petra? Petra was built in a valley. On either side of the valley were large mountains with cliffs. These cliffs were as good as city walls. So the people of Petra built walls from one mountain cliff to the other mountain cliff, both on this side of the valley and also on the other side of the valley. So Petra had city walls. Another distinctive feature in Petra is that it contains a very unique stream. Now usually you have a valley with mountains on one side, mountains on the other, and a stream running down the center of the valley. But in this case, long ago, earthquakes cracked these mountains so that there is a crack in that mountain, water runs through that crack, across the valley, and out the crack in the other side. The Nabateans built a colonnaded street from one mountain to the other mountain, and beside it was a rainwater course. Let's go down there. Now in Islam, one of the duties of the pilgrims is to go 7 times between 2 mountains called Marwa and Safa. What is interesting is that Bukhari tells us that Muhammad chose to do this, running in the rainwater course between the 2 mountains. But there are problems. Safa and Marwa are just small rocks. Today they're housed right inside of the mosque building. As you can see on this drawing, there was no rainwater course between these 2 rocks. But here in Petra, the description fits exactly from one mountain to the other. There are 4 ways into the Petra basin. Since Petra is in a valley, one could enter from either end of the valley.
During the year of the contest of Mecca, the Prophet entered Mecca through its upper part.
But there were also other ways of entering Petra. The ancient records tell us that the holy city could be entered and exited by a crack in the rocks. In Arabic, this is called a thaniya. Al-Bukhari mentions this several times.
Allah's apostle used to enter Mecca from the high thaniya and used to leave Mecca from the low thaniya. The Prophet went on advancing till he reached the thaniya through which one would go to them, that is, the people of Quraysh.
There are 2 thaniya entrances. One of these is the famous Sikh that tourists pass through to enter the city. The other is on the far side of the colonnaded street and leads into a maze of canyons that eventually empty out into Wadi Araba below the Dead Sea. Petra also has many temples. Over here is what is known today as the Temple of the Winged Lions, or the Temple to Al-Uzza. Behind me is what is known as Kesser al-Bint today, or the temple to the god Dushera. This short chain of mountains here was the home to the god, and here in the very heart of the mountains is the temple to this god, El-Dushera.
Now, Ibn Hisham relates to us a very interesting story. It's very early in Islamic history. Only a few people have converted to Islam at this time. One of those was a man known as Al-Tufail bin Amr of Mecca. He accepted Islam on one of his journeys, and once he returned home to Mecca, his wife also decided to accept Islam. Al-Tufail then tells his wife to go to the temple of Dushera and cleanse herself there. In the sacred area, there was a trickle of water where she could wash herself. She did this and returned home and learned about Islam.
Did this story take place in Mecca, 1,000 kilometers away, where there is no temple to Dushera? Or did it take place here in Petra? If it did, then Dushera's temple is there. She would have come down to this temple, washed herself, and gone home. Is there a temple to Dushera in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia? No. There are no temples, no cracks in the rock, no water stream, no city walls, no grass, no trees, nothing. It's all here in Petra. And for the first 100 years, every mosque in the entire Islamic world pointed here to Masjid al-Haram, the forbidden gathering place, here in Petra. There is no other city in the world that fits this description so perfectly.
Now, Al-Haktab had so harassed Zayd that he forced him to withdraw to the upper part of Mecca, and he stopped in the mountain of Hira, facing the town.
It's interesting to note that in this account, Mount Hira is located in the upper part of Mecca. If you go to Mecca today, the cave of Hira doesn't face the city. But here in Petra, the high side of the city is north of the colonnaded street, and the low part of the city is south of the colonnaded street. In effect, the city was divided in half by the colonnaded street.
If Petra is the holy city of Mecca, then the cave where Muhammad received his first revelation should be located there.
The ancient records say that the cave faced the town, and that it was low down since Muhammad tried to climb the mountain to throw himself off. If that's the case, I think I know just the spot, but we'll have to go over there. Here in this cave, we can see where there are many various god blocks. Up there is a large crescent symbol. This is just the sort of cave where young men would go to contemplate the meaning of life. The descriptions and location of this cave are just like the ancient records describe it. Just outside of the city, the entrance facing the city, and evidence that people spent time here in religious worship and meditation. I think that this is one of the holiest spots for all of Islam, and it's here, in Petra.
The Quran commands every Muslim to face the forbidden gathering place when they pray. Now, the forbidden gathering place wasn't a building. It was much more than this. It was a large area marked out with special stones. These stones marked the boundary around the sacred area. No killing was allowed inside this area. Even birds were not killed. Now, what kind of stones would you need to mark out such an area? If you had just small round stones, they would be lost among the other stones of the desert. They must have been larger stones. And there should have been something special about them, so that you knew for certain that this was the boundary of the sacred area. Today, in Mecca, there are no special boundary stones. Historians have long wondered what these marker stones might have looked like, but they seem to have been lost in the years that have passed since then. Or perhaps they were never there. If Petra is the original holy city of Islam, then of course the special stones wouldn't be in Mecca. They would be in Petra.
Now there's a feature about Petra that's absolutely fascinating. Whenever tourists come to the city, they pass by a number of square-cut stones known as the Jinn rocks. This is a fanciful name given to them by the local Bedouin. What is interesting is that there are more than 20 of these large square stones marking all of the entrances of the city. Is it possible that these mark out the forbidden sanctuary? Perhaps that's why they're not located in Mecca. If that is true, then Masjid al-Haram, or the forbidden sanctuary, would have been located here. And if it was located here, then the Kaaba would have been located here as well. But it's not, because a man named Ibn Zubair moved it.
So far in this program, we have been examining the direction of prayer that Muslims originally faced. As we've seen, all of the mosques constructed during the first 100 years of Islam pointed to Petra. By using the two mosques on the Amman citadel, Dan Gibson has determined the approximate years when the Qibla direction changed. Does Islamic history give us any clues as to why the direction of prayer might have changed? If we look into Islamic history at this exact time, we come face to face with the Second Islamic Civil War.
حصلت حروب كثيرة في الإسلام، ولكن أيضا حصلت حروب أهلية بينهم بسبة الخلافة بعد وفاة محمد، ولهذا السبب صار في شيعة وسنة. الأمويين فازوا اللي هم السنة، والحكم بدأ من دمشق.
At this point in history, the governor in the holy city was Abdullah ibn Zubair. He was particularly unhappy. In his eyes, the holy city was the most important city of Islam, the mother of all cities. But the Umayyad rulers chose Damascus as the new capital city, and a lot of people were unhappy with the corruption and the infighting in Damascus. So in 683 AD, about 64 years after the founding of Islam, Ibn Zubair declared himself Caliph in the holy city, and that started the Second Islamic Civil War.
The Umayyads reacted strongly and sent an army against the holy city. Ibn Zubayr then did a shocking thing. He destroyed the Kaaba, the ancient holy shrine of Islam.
Ibn Zubayr then demolished the Kaaba sanctuary until he had leveled it to the ground and dug out its foundation. Then he placed the black stone beside it in a wooden stand in a strip of silk.
The Umayyads fought against Ibn Zubayr and his companions, but after 40 days, news arrived that the ruling caliph in Damascus had died. Now, the Umayyad generals insisted that the battle wasn't over, but that they must return to Damascus so that a new caliph could be established. The members of the Umayyad royal family had come to the battle as well, and they insisted that they must return to Damascus under the protection of the entire army, so the whole army marches off.
The problem we face here is one of timing. The Islamic records are quite clear that when the Caliph died, his 13-year-old son ruled in his place. Al-Tabari, volume 20, tells us specifically that his son survived only 40 days after his father died before he too was killed. During this time, the armies from the Holy City returned to Damascus. Now, a slow-moving army would have taken many days to cover the 1,400-kilometer trek across the desert from Mecca in Saudi Arabia to Damascus in Syria. If the army could move at 20 miles a day, it still would have taken them 43 days. When you add up the time the messenger took to bring the message, the time it took for the army to decide to return and get mobilized, and the 43-day march, there is simply not enough time. Mecca is too far away to be believable. However, if the holy city was Petra, then the distances would all be drastically reduced. This problem of distances plagues Islamic history again and again. Mecca in Saudi Arabia is simply too far removed to fit many of the stories in early Islamic history.
Now, with the lull in the war, Ibn Zubayr had time to rebuild his defenses and prepare for the return of the Umayyad army.
Now I want to show you something. Here are some of the volumes of Al-Tabari's History of Islam. Al-Tabari managed to collect a massive amount of material that he writes about what happened during each year of Islamic history. He devotes whole chapters, sometimes 2 chapters, to every year. But then something strange happens. The battle for the Holy City takes place over several years, but year 70 of Islamic history is of great importance. Now notice, Al-Tabari spends 15 pages describing what happens in year 69, and he spends 27 pages describing what happens in year 71. But where is year 70? Look at this. For year 70, Al-Tabari only records a few lines of text. Did he not find any more information for this year? Or did later editors censor this year from Al-Tabari's record? Only a few lines, but what he records gives us a few tantalizing details.